Hi friends, this is Angelica. Thanks for joining me here on the Greenery YouTube channel. There's a new collection that's coming to the Greenery shop this Friday, March 10th, and we are going to take a closer look at a few products that are going to be available. We're going to start with the new BotaniCuts dye, which is this beautiful morning glory. Here's a quick look at the dye. Now, I don't typically snip my BotaniCuts dyes apart. I like to just die cut white cardstock and then use my own inks to add color to the leaves and stems and blooms, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start with peacock feathers. I love this blue-green to be underneath the other greens that I'm going to be using. It really makes the colors pop a bit more, gives it a bit more vibrance. And I'm also working on Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I'm using finger sponges to blend my ink out with, and the Distress Oxide inks is just so lovely to work with. They blend so easily, especially with these little sponges. Now, the next color that I used was Mowed Lawn, and I just added that all over the stem, and then I'm going to deepen up the areas that I want to look like there's some shadows with Rustic Wilderness. There were a couple areas that I needed to go back and use the Mowed Lawn to blend out the Rustic Wilderness, and then I'm going to move on to the leaves details, and there are a couple leaves to glue onto the stem also. So I added a soft layer of Mowed Lawn, and then I'm going to darken them up with Rustic Wilderness, and then we're going to move on to the blooms. Now, before I picked my colors for the blooms, I did go on to Pinterest for some inspiration. I have morning glories in my backyard, but they're white, and I've only seen white in person. So I wanted to see if there were other colors that they come in, and I found a picture of somebody's backyard with a beautiful vine of blue morning glories. So that totally inspired me to use Salty Ocean and Tumbled Glass inks to color these blooms with. And again, I'm using finger daubers, but some of the blooms do lean to the side, so I wanted to keep the darker color in the middle, but more of a horizontal line. So I needed to use a brush, and I pulled out this Stamp Market brush. It's got a thinner circle bristles on the top of it, and it really helped contain the inner color for the blooms. Once I was happy with the amount of blue that was in the center of the blooms, I did blend it out just a little bit with Tumbled Glass to finish the top of the blooms. And then there also is a bloom base that we're going to glue those leaning blooms onto. And the underside of the base is going to be sticking out. So I picked Uncharted Mariner to color that part that's going to be sticking out, just so it's going to be even darker than the blooms themselves. And the last part of the flowers are the stamen, and I just used a sponge that had yellow ink on it. I didn't even pull out an ink color for it. I believe it is mustard seed that is on the sponge, but I did a quick coat of that, and now we're going to glue the bloom onto their bases, and there's ridges so you can match up the bloom and the base together. And I should mention that this die set will come with an assembly guide to help you if you need a reference on how to put the morning glory together. I didn't have one to show on screen, but I was able to put this together without the guide, so it is pretty easy to put together. There are two full leaves that have spots on the stem. You can see exactly where they go, so I just used a little bit of glue to attach those leaves, and then there's two leaf details to add. And the details are pretty delicate. They're really delicate die cuts, so I just was really careful on how much glue I put on the back of them because I didn't want to put them down on the leaves and then the glue comes out and activates the Distress Oxide ink. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are using inks and glue. Just be really careful on the amount of glue that goes on these really small pieces. Now for the blooms, there are little V's that are on the main stem, and this is what you're going to glue the blooms onto. You're actually going to glue the blooms to the backside of the V's, and on the bloom bases, there's also a V at the bottom to show exactly where to attach them onto the stem. We're going to finish the Morning Glory with this last large bloom. You can tell exactly where it goes, and there's again ridges on this stem that matches the ridges on the flower. So I got those lined up, add a little bit of glue to the back of the blossom, and that finishes this really beautiful Morning Glory. Now we're going to move on to assembling a card. I need a background, so I'm going to use the new Spring Meadow rubber background stamp, and I'm going to stamp it onto light yellow cardstock. I'm going to use Concord and Ninth Buttercup ink to make just a beautiful yellow background. When I'm using a background stamp, I do like to stamp my grid paper first, so I know exactly where I need to put the card panel before adding ink and stamping the panel. And I just love this buttercup ink on this light yellow cardstock. So my original idea for this card was to have the Morning Glory on an arched die cut, but once I put it on the yellow background, I decided I would like the yellow background to be the frame. So I die cut a frame. I used an A2 arched die to die cut the frame, and then I die cut a second frame, a smaller one, out of vellum. I attached the vellum and the yellow panel together, and just to make sure that I got it straight, I only exposed a little bit of double-sided adhesive and then pushed that down onto the vellum. It looked good, so then I exposed the rest of the adhesive by taking off the backing, and I found this to be the easiest way to attach the panels together without ruining the vellum. Since I had my A2 arches die set out, I pulled out one of the coordinating stencils to help me blend a little bit of light blue ink onto the white panel. I keep my stencils in the same pocket, so that really helped me keep the inking towards the top on that curve really nice and even. And I just loved how the little bit of blue looked. I did decide I wanted to add some blue splatter to the background also, so I used some salty ocean ink with a little bit of water, made some splatters, and then I used Uncharted Mariner just to add a couple darker blue splatter marks to the panel also. Once the panel was dry, I pulled out my MISTI and I assembled the card in my MISTI so I can get it ready to stamp a sentiment. The sentiment that I used is from the New Day Sentiment stamp set. This is part of the new collection, and I picked a really pretty sentiment that does have the word morning in it. I thought it was going to be a perfect match to go with the Morning Glory. And once the sentiment was stamped, I attached the panel together. I used a little bit of thin foam squares to add the Morning Glories, just to pop those blooms up a little bit. I did make a second card off screen using 3 Morning Glories on a slimline card. I arranged them so they look like a vine, and then I paired it with a Rejoice die cut. This is what the die looks like. It has the Rejoice word and then the background for the word to sit on. And then there's also a foil plate Rejoice and a coordinating stamp set with the word Rejoice and then some matching words to go with it. So let's take one last look at these cards. The Morning Glory, what a stunning die set. I am so in love with it. I'm so glad I looked up different colors for it too. I saw pink ones and purple, and I just love this blue and yellow together. Putting them on a slimline too and making it look like a vine. Absolutely beautiful. Now you can find all the details on these products plus the rest of the release over on the Greetery channel, so be sure to head over there. And again, these products will be in the Greetery shop tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I want to thank the Greetery for giving me the opportunity to introduce these products to you. That's all that I have for today. Take care, friends.